I may be a cat person, but I am a sucker for golden retrievers. And today's portrait is of one such dog that was just a total sweetheart and so fun to paint. So today I'd like to talk about how I approached this painting and what made it so fun to tackle so that you can create enjoyable and successful canine portraits as well. So, to start out, the first thing that really helped me with this painting was taking a reference that I was really happy with. Our subject, Millie, was very friendly but pretty camera shy, which meant that she hit a pose suitable for painting maybe for 5 cumulative seconds if you add up every little moment of good posing in the hour or so that I took pictures. I definitely could not have painted her from life as a result of this. Beyond that, though, taking my own photo meant that I could get exactly the kind of shot that I was really excited to paint. Specifically, here's my process for that. When I take photos for commissions, my objective is to understand what sorts of images the client wants. That's what I need first and foremost, and from there I can decide what my spin on those would be that I like and can get really excited about. I consider it my job here to find out what kind of shot I would love to paint and then share that with the client. We don't always choose the one that I'm most excited about, but by making sure that my first step here is to understand the client's needs and then to also factor in my own desires for the piece and finding where that overlap is, I can make sure that that excitement comes back to the client, and I can make sure that we're going to create a painting that everyone is really, really in love with. So, with my client's wishes in mind, here is what I set out to capture when photographing Millie. First, I wanted to have a somewhat still, regal looking pose that was more about her face than her body. For me, the idea here is to be able to paint as if she were really sitting in front of me and like posing, like traditional portraiture. And I can pretend that I'm painting from life, where my primary focus would be in capturing the likeness of her face. Don't get me wrong, I got a lot of great shots of her running and playing and rolling in the grass, but these would have resulted in a different tone and a different impression of the kind of painting my piece is trying to be. There are fantastic illustrators who can capture this kind of movement in a way that feels really authentic, but I think in general, especially with fine art, it's really tricky with certain types of reference not to come off looking like a painted photo. And this is exactly what I'm trying to avoid in my work. And of course, because I paint so many children and cute, cuddly, but like squirmy animals, all of whom want to be in constant motion, this is a real challenge for me and something that I have to be actively assessing in my work all of the time. So I've found that there are a lot of things that feed into this for me. So I usually pick a lens that most closely mimics how the human eye might see something, just as a start. I then also try and avoid composing a photo in a way that's really specific to photography, which I know is kind of confusing, so I'll give you an example. So in paintings, we usually don't see just portions of a subject. We usually see an entire subject, and if anything actually is kind of cropped off in the composition, it's something that's not especially important. Now, if you compare this to any kind of modern photography, especially like the way that we take selfies, rarely do we have our whole body in the shot. And it's not uncommon to not even have our whole face or our whole head in the shot. So one reason I'm so happy that this image of of Millie came out the way that it did is that it's composed in a way that feels fairly natural, and it looks the way that I saw her that morning when I took the picture. So there's no like weird kind of fisheye effect with the lens where maybe she like got too close to me and her nose is huge and the rest of her looks really tiny. No, instead, like all of her proportions look really natural, and while there is some cropping here, it's not like I only got 3/4 of her face or something like that. And it feels very akin to what I might actually sketch in a sketchbook versus what might happen if I were to sketch from a photograph. The second reason I'm pleased with this is because of what the light was able to show about her expression and the color and the textures of her coat. I love how the backlighting brings out all of these warm gold tones, while the parts of her that are facing us and are not catching that morning light have some beautiful, subtle purples in them. This is one of the main differences between the photographs that I intentionally go out to take when taking a commission versus photographs that may be given to me. I'm really trying to compose a shot that's going to capture as much naturalistic color as possible, whereas a lot of the time when we're taking pictures of our own kids or our own pets, our main concern is just capturing like a cute, sweet moment rather than like trying to be an artist. So as a result, I think color is usually one of the first things to go, and similarly, lighting is kind of right up there with it. It's not always the most flattering lighting, even if it's a wonderful photo that we love looking at. Now that I have a reference that I really like, it's time to go ahead and clean things up a bit. So to start, I'm going to adjust the crop and remove some background elements so that it's just Millie in a grassy yard. The truth is that to get the right shot, a lot of things had to go right. So, of course, I had a helper who was kind of holding her steady. There was another dog in the shot who had been playing with her just a couple moments before, and my camera tripod is out. And I can't really control when she hits the perfect pose and whether or not she might be in this like perfect patch of green grass or whether she's in a totally different part of the yard. But most importantly, I'm really happy with how she turned out, so all of these other details are things that I can easily manipulate out of the image. But making these changes means going ahead and going into Photoshop. Once I do that, I treat this as the new reference. This edited image is my touchstone for everything, and I no longer look at that first image. And once I have that touchstone in place, I really don't deviate off of it except maybe to simplify. That's why these initial steps are so critical. If I'm second guessing the composition all the way toward the end of the painting, I'm not really setting myself up for success, and I'm definitely not working efficiently. Instead, I want to set a time to question the composition and work out all of those details, and then decide that I'm happy with it and move on wholeheartedly to the next step of the process, which is to translate that composition from the photo to the canvas. It might be tempting to tell yourself that you can do this on the fly, and that's not to say that I don't also make changes on the fly, but what I will say is that the more you take this attitude, the more variables you're throwing in the mix, the more potential wrenches you're throwing in the mix. If you're experimenting as you're trying to translate your image onto the canvas, there's a good chance that you'll wind up deciding halfway through that the idea that you had that you were so sure was going to work wasn't as good of an idea as you thought. And so you can definitely really slow yourself down or trip yourself up that way. But that's not the only reason to kind of be wary of this. I think the second thing that we often underestimate as artists is just how taxing it is to translate something. Going from either something you're looking at that's physically in front of you or going from a photograph and figuring out how to distill that into a painting. That translation takes a great deal of concentration as you think about how you can translate these millions of pixels into simplified brushstrokes that are supposed to kind of capture the essence of something. Even for the most advanced, masterful painters, this can take up all of their brain power. So the last thing you want is to keep another part of your brain busy and kind of take up that precious processing power, kind of second guessing yourself or trying to be creative while you're also trying to do this really compute intensive task. As an extension of this, a critical step here is that I show this kind of curated, updated reference to my client and ask if that's the image I can proceed with. Because I don't want to kind of make assumptions about where I'm taking the composition, even after I've taken the photo and gotten that approved. I don't want to find out at the very end that I need to put in a completely different background. Now, there's always a chance that I'm going to make adjustments at the end. In fact, I shouldn't even say a chance. Making adjustments at the end for the client are a part of this process, but as much as I can, I want those kind of big creative decisions totally done with, whether it's me who's doing the second guessing or the client who's requesting that I make an adjustment. But once this is done, I can dive into painting without having to really worry about that anymore, which it's kind of funny that I say, like, all right, it's time to paint because you've been watching this painting unfold for, 11 whole minutes already. But hey, I'll do a little bit of backtracking and we'll catch us up. So one thing I loved about the way that this painting came together right from the start is that this piece is a really great example of exactly how much work the underpainting can do for your final product. So by the end of this first sitting, I not only had a reasonably good block in, I also had brushwork that I thought was really interesting and would be worth allowing to show through in the final piece, which actually did wind up happening. More and more in my work, this I would say is exactly what I'm striving toward, allowing a sense of playfulness with the paint to come through, whether that's coming from a translucent underpainting or a thick buildup of abstract paint that I put on toward the end. Millie here was a great example of the former, and in an upcoming video, I'll talk about a painting that got me a lot more comfortable with and kind of excited about or like feeling momentum with the latter. My goal isn't just to paint like more thick or more thin. It's that I want each stage of this process to be as visually interesting and inviting to the viewer as I can. So as an Alla Prima painter, I'm not just thinking like how much impasto or how much paint can I build up on my canvas. And conversely, it's not all about kind of the style that I was using for the monochromatic piece a few videos back, where everything is thinned down with solvent and the entire painting is literally very flat. There's no paint texture that I'm adding. In the end, I really want to kind of marry these. And that's not to say that there won't be paintings that have a whole bunch of paint buildup and that there won't be paintings like the monochromatic one where I'm intentionally not building up any paint at all and I'm painting very thin. But ideally, I can have that entire range to pull from. I don't have to rely on building up thick paint for interest. Or conversely, I'm not like so afraid of building up a whole lot of paint that I only work super thin. This painting, as well as the next couple of paintings that I'm going to be sharing with you, were all super important pieces on that journey, I think, because each one kind of just nudged me a little bit further down that path in a way that I could see as I was doing it, which was really special. A lot of the times the progress we're making is so hard to see in the moment. But But each of these pieces you're going to see over the coming week just have these like little light bulb moments. And that's definitely what happened here with Millie. I know at this point in the video, we're well past that first sitting, but by the time I was done with that session, I was like, wow, that was a really great block in. I want my block in to feel this way every time I sit down to paint. I think this is honestly what's so cool about painting. You're always learning, and you can make beautiful paintings even as you continue to experiment and learn more about where you want to take your craft. But let's get past talking about that first sitting. So as I kind of start building on the underpainting, my focus is really on what benefits I can get by building up the paint layer. After all, as I have talked about in the monochrome painting videos over the past month, is that the tricky thing there is you have to do it in one sitting, or you kind of have to fudge it a little bit, and either way, you're really compressed for time in a way that you aren't with other types of oil painting. So this is all to say that I can only really work in that kind of thin, translucent method for that first sitting. And after that point, I have to approach the painting totally differently. I'm not counting on being able to use any of the transparency effects the way that I can in those first couple of layers. But I don't want to lose the magic of that block in either. So here's where I'm thinking that I want to focus the buildup of paint as this goes on. As I look at the reference and I make decisions about how I want to move forward and what of the underpainting I want to leave versus what I need to continue to work on, obviously there's an element of correcting the drawing that's always going to be in play. So things that I have to do to capture the likeness, yes, I'm going to build up the paint in order to do that. But there are places where it's not really about the likeness. So for instance, I'm really excited about these little like wispies on her ears that are catching the light. And I think to myself that I can really punch this up by working with thicker paint. The idea here is that I want the light to really jump out at you. And as a result, having a little bit more texture kind of aids in that sense of oomph, if that makes sense. I hope it does. So as I'm moving forward, I'm thinking first about the likeness. But beyond that, I'm kind of specifically looking to add some paint to the areas where the light is catching these little wispies of fur coming off of her ears, as well as the sheen that's around her nose. But overall, because the underpainting went so smoothly, this part really didn't take a whole lot of time or energy. And I feel really encouraged by that. I wish I could say that every painting from here on out is going to have that level of things just clicking, but it won't. But it's still a breakthrough, and it's still something that I'm going to continue to just edge closer and closer to. In seeing the proof of that here in this piece and repeated in the next couple of pieces you're going to see, just goes to show that like even when I'm having a bad painting day, which does happen, that I can have faith in my own progress. And in turn, that means that I can chalk up a bad day to just a bad day and not something about my ability. And when that happens, I can decide to be productive elsewhere and come back to the painting when I'm set up to have a good day, which I think is something that we as artists tend to overlook. A lot of the time, when we have a bad day, we don't realize that it's because we literally set ourselves up to fail over and over because we didn't have a tidy workspace, or we hadn't picked a good reference, or we weren't actually excited about the things that we're painting that day. It sounds kind of frivolous almost, but those things really add up. And I think as creative people, we tend to be really bad at being objective about seeing those things, acknowledging them for what they are. And instead, we just look inward and say that it's something about ourselves or our ability or, worst of all, our worth. This is something I wind up talking to my students about a lot because as a teacher, I think it's much easier for me to see the progress that they're making. But when you're in it, when you're the student, when you're the learner, which I am here as well, we're all learners sometimes. We're learners whenever we sit down to one of our own paintings. We're learners whenever we are working next to an artist who has something to teach us. When we're in that mindset, it's so hard to be objective. But when I have a student who's in the learner seat and it's my job to teach and help them on their journey, it's so easy for me to see all the good things that are happening and all the changes that they're making and all the good habits that are building up. But I know that I can't be there all the time. So if this resonates with you, if this feels like something that you struggle with, whether it's once in a blue moon or, you've been on the verge of giving up, I hope this brings you comfort because that is exactly the point of this. You deserve to have that comfort. You need to be sharing your creativity with the world, and don't let a bad day or a bad streak where you can't see your own progress hold you back from brightening the lives of everyone around you. It's funny, none of that was in my notes for today's video, but it just seemed like such a natural and important thing to share, but nonetheless it feels so weird to have gone there in a video, I guess. So if that's something you needed to hear or you liked hearing something like that, please let me know. I really like chatting with you all in the comments, but it's more than just chatting. It's so helpful for me to hear what you're really enjoying and what you want more of. So I think it could be a cool thing to kind of touch on in more videos, but I want to know what you all think. As always, if you learned something cool, whether it was about painting dogs, taking references, or just about the artist mindset, I hope you'll give this video a like so that more people can find this. And if you haven't already, I think we're gonna hit 1,000 subscribers with this video, and I'm so excited. So if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you know whenever a new video goes up and you can be the first to see it and you don't miss anything, and you also get to know whenever I'm doing a live streaming video. If you hit that, that'd be awesome. It would mean the world. As always, I hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. And until next time, happy painting.